Ready? All right, welcome everyone to the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee special meeting, November 1st, 2021 at 2 o'clock. I'd like to call to order and do a roll call. Robin Denson, City Council.
Tracy Markley, City Council.
Lee Rodenberg, City Council.
Eric Kuhn, City Gig Harbor.
25 Secchi, Interim City Administrator.
Kelly Busey, staff.
Trina Knutson, staff.
Josh Stecker, Interim City Clerk.
Trent Ward, staff.
All right, do our lobbyists want to chime in?
Dale Learn, Gordon Thomas Honeywell.
Josh Weiss, GTH.
Annika Vaughn, GTH.
Okay, that worked out surprisingly well. We'll go to the discussion items now. First, we'll start with the 2022 legislative agenda. And I don't know, Dale, if you or Josh wants to start first. I guess, Dale, you're going second maybe, right? Okay. Josh Weiss, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Denson. Nice to see you, everybody. So we, after our last conversation, put the draft together for your consideration and review. I know, let's see, two things. I know that from the email chatter that you'd like to have a little more discussion about the law enforcement language. And then I also will report back that we had a conversation with Senator Randall about the sports complex. And so if it's all right, I'll just dive into that and report on that. So she definitely is getting multiple capital budget requests this year. The Port of Bremerton is also asking for $2 million for a breakwater improvement up in Sinclair Inlet outside of Port Orchard. She is happy to put this request forward for the sports complex. She does believe in it. She does support it. She's clearly going to have some pressure to carry both projects forward. One of the things that she asked for is basically a walkthrough up at the sports center. And she even requested maybe like a public open house, public meeting type of scenario where members of the community are engaged and able to provide her, input and feedback. And I think there's, pretty good opportunity there for us to demonstrate to her both the process that the city has gone through to get to the point that you're at, because I know there's been a lot of it, and just the community support, which I know there's also a lot of as well. So I guess my recommendation at this point is that we continue forward with the request as we have it structured. And we do work with your staff to go ahead and get that tour and open house, for lack of a better word, set up.
The question is, I'm sorry, is this Emily?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, it's luckily she's not here. They've kind of passed us by a couple times and done other projects. So we've kind of been pushed off, except for Fish, but that was an ask from Fish. We've kind of been pushed off. Also, I mean, we've spent 3 years on an interlocal agreement with the Y. We have big maps showing what we're building. We've got all sorts of things. So I don't know what we could tell her that we signed an interlocal agreement with the YMCA, with the CEO. We can show her a lot of things, but 3 years into this, asking us to pull together a few people that show interest, we're way past that. It's and we don't even know if that's going to get us anywhere. So it's interesting that we can have all this proof showing what we're doing, and yet anyway, maybe I'm just the only one frustrated with that statement.
Josh, if we had an open house, what would the timing be on that? What would be the best time?
I would say, as soon as we can, before January, the sooner the better.
Yeah, because there would be no problem putting together probably hundreds of people. It's such a popular project. So I think if we put out the call, she would be overwhelmed with the community's response.
I kind of think that would be neat.
I agree.
Yeah,
So
and
maybe
I-
we would work on that.
I agree too. I'm not opposed. I'm just, it's almost like she doesn't know anything about it and we have to go through all these hoops and hurdles to show her something that's already been done.
I think that's it. I think it's more for her to have some justification for when she takes this to the other legislators, that she can say, look at this open house, look at all these people who showed up. This is relevant and timely. I think she wants us to help her when she's advocating for this. That's my impression.
Well, I think we could put something together in conjunction with the Y and hold it on the Y property, but then we'd be able to walk on either side of the Y's property to show her what the land looks like now. As the mayor said, we have schematics up the yin yang we can show her and talk to the Y about how we go about inviting people and who we should be inviting. So staff would be happy to work on that.
Maybe
Great.
this is an opportunity as well for the Y to put out the call for fundraising for individual donations. You know, they're walking around and then people can donate to them for their part of it.
Yeah, we could just put a little drop box that people can throw checks in.
Well, I was gonna have a question on that too. I know Tracy had her hand up, but real quick on this question. We have to realize, is the Y asking for the money for their fields, or are we asking the money for what we're building? Because if we bring the Y together, it gets a little blurry because they're completely separate, even though they're right next to each other. The Y is
Yeah.
doing a fundraiser for 8 million, but they're doing that on their own. And I thought we were asking for R1B.
We're asking for 1B. Sorry.
Are we only asking for 1B, Josh? Nothing towards the lit fields at all?
That's my understanding, is that this is for the pickleball courts. Yeah, nothing for lit fields.
Well, and I think that's kind of appropriate because the interlocal agreement was that the Y was going to raise that money. And we're already giving them $500,000. So I think we're good with that.
It's the YMCA is not asking the legislature for this. We are. So a fundraiser at the Y with Emily would be, I think, very appropriate. And we could fill up that parking lot, I'm sure.
I think we just need to make sure that the senator understands that we are there with our partner, and our partner is supporting our requests for funding for 1B. And as long as they're okay with that, then doing it together, I think is not a problem.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's supporting our request and we're supporting them by helping with a fundraiser, getting people there to draw attention to their part.
Well, and I don't know that there's any harm in reminding her that Bremerton got a whole lot of money last year and maybe the wealth needs to be spread around, because Gig Harbor seems to be, like the mayor said, we keep getting passed over for these huge projects that are going to benefit Bremerton and the kids in Bremerton as well as the kids in Gig Harbor. So it's, I think it's time we just should put the pressure on for sure, because this is a worthy project. It's been going on for a long time and Bremerton got our money last year. So I think we should get it this year.
Emphasize that it's a regional sports complex,
Right.
not just a Gig Harbor sports complex. And the region is her district.
Yes.
Every little city that she represents.
Yep. In a nice way, of course, respectful, nice way, but like hammer the point home at the same time. So however we can do that.
Agreed.
I'll just add to a little more context. I think it's really great that your community members are very involved, but I think she gets more pressure from certain community groups speaking directly to her. So she just has people from the community speaking about different priorities. So I think it's more that we need to show a concentrated effort and need and want for this within the community that's coming from the city voice.
I think
she has
she'll
people
have
reaching.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not that she doesn't know that this is a priority. I think it's just, like you said, she needs a little bit, she needs something to back up her work when she's advocating for this project.
Okay, so how do we know that she'll be there? Meaning we don't want to schedule a time and then she says, I'm busy.
We'll coordinate that. Mayor.
Okay, you give us a date and then we'll do the rally. Okay,
So let's pop, if we're good there, let's pop up to the congestion relief projects, because I had a couple questions on that. So it talks in the narrative about how we recently completed a congestion relief study. When was that study? Do you guys remember? I don't know if Trent remembers.
I can look it up.
I'm just thinking, what's that?
It's been, I would say it's been over 2 years ago because it was prior to COVID. So
Oh, yeah.
it was maybe 3 to 4 years ago now.
2017, 2018.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I don't think it's a bad thing to point out that these items have been on our legislative agenda for, this will be the third year, right? Josh, so I think
Yes.
we could make that point somewhere. Again, showing that we've been consistent, we've not been jumping around, we've had this for 3 years. Maybe it's time that they give us one of these things.
I think that's true. I don't think it's a bad idea. I honestly, I don't think that's what's gonna get the project funded or not. These will get funded if they do a transportation revenue package.
Oh.
We just are waiting for them to adopt something. So if they do something, I'm fairly confident, if not 100% confident, that we'll be in the package. They just haven't done it yet. But you're right. I mean, it's been since 2017, 18 with the congestion study that we've been asking for this.
Okay. And we're going to meet with our legislators again, aren't we, before the session? So we need just to make sure they're all on the same page with these 3 specific projects.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about law enforcement legislation adjustments. And I don't know if you guys saw the email, and I apologize, it was super last minute by the time I got a chance to read this. And it just, to me, it seemed way more specific than what we had discussed at our last meeting. So I asked Josh if he had other examples from other cities that are, because I think this is on everybody's mind. I think it's an issue all over the state. And the examples he gave us from Port Orchard and SeaTac were a little bit broader and a little bit more general than the specific, calling out the specific parts of the legislation that need to be modified. But I'd love to know Councilmember Markley and Councilmember Rodenberg's thoughts on this. And Chief,
would think-
of course.
I would think we should be specific. If we're not, you know, they may do something else. I think we should be, if SeaTac and those other cities are more broad and we're more specific, we need to put in their mind, no doubt, what we want to see changed, in my opinion. Chief,
Robin, I'm
sorry.
just reading through your email, Robin, real quick. Give me a few.
Yeah, it was really last minute. And, you know, I'd love to know strategically Josh's point of view as well in terms of the best way to approach these legislators and not put them on the defensive. And we want them to come back to the table with WASPIC and talk about, you know, whatever the issues are. And I know there's probably a number of them.
I think you're going to be fine with whatever direction you go on this language. You know, we obviously work with the other jurisdictions that I gave you examples for. I'm comfortable with that. And, you know, I talked specifically with Tony and Chief Busey. We can make this work too. It's not going to be problematic at all. I also know that, you know, our delegation is going to be a little bit split too. So you're walking a little bit of a fine line. I'm sure you probably can't be strong enough for our House members. And then I think we need to be a little more gentle with our senators. So I think either way, you're going to be okay.
Oh,
I'd like,
Lee, go
I'd
ahead.
like to hear the chief chime in, but Josh, I agree with you about and really appreciate your expertise and knowledge about which ones we need to be tougher with and which ones we don't. So certainly we would listen to you, but Chief, what are your comments. You've been working with the other chiefs and sheriffs.
Right, and I don't know if we're losing people because my screen is kind of dropping some, but it looks like they're coming back online now. I'm not privy to whatever email chain that you were just referencing.
I just forwarded it to you, Chief.
Yeah, I think that the statement that we developed when we met with Josh last week closely parallels the WASPIC direction too. I think it's also reflective of what I'm hearing from the community members when they identify certain things that they're most concerned with. So I think the blend of those two things, I think being point specific is probably the right direction.
Okay, Mr. Piasecki, you've got your hand up?
Yep, I saw your email where you suggested the word reform be changed to refined or something else like that. And I think I would support that. You're right, reform does sound like more of a total overhaul. So there's a need to refine proposals.
Yeah, I had refine, improve, modify. Any of those I think are better than the word reform, which I think is just kind of, I don't know, it's very loaded.
But otherwise, I agree that based on what I know, what I'm hearing and my experience with legislators, they want a little specificity sometimes, and they want your honest feeling and not just what they want to hear. So this may be just a little bit too much for one or two of our members, and like Josh said, not quite enough for another, but I think it strikes the right balance.
Well, I trust our chief. I don't know enough about any of this, which is why we have our chief. I just don't know enough about any of this personally, but if this is what he feels needs to be done to protect our community and make sure we keep everybody safe, then, I'm okay with that. Councilmember Markley?
Yeah, I would support changing that word as well to either modify or refine, something like that. And then I agree with what the chief said. I think if he's comfortable with the rest of this, then that's great. And let's just move forward with that.
Okay, so Josh, you'll make that little tweak, whatever word you think is better for reform.
You're giving us the discretion to choose. You don't have a choice.
One of those three. Refine, improve, modify, something like that.
Maybe modify, but it's not leaning towards something needs to be improved or something, I don't know. Just
Modify.
keep it as
Go with modified.
neutral as possible.
I like it. Okay, fund local culverts. The only thing I had on this one was where we say provide adequate funding to address local and private culverts. Do we need to say local public and private culverts? I'm probably just mincing words here.
Yes, I would leave private in there because there are some culverts that are private that need to be daylighted, and if there's money available for them as well as the public ones, we support that.
No, I'm fine with that, but do we need to add the word public in there? Because it just says local and private.
I mean,
If I might add in, I would support saying public deliberately, because I think then it's very clear. The way it reads right now, local, like Chairman Denson saying, is a little bit squishy.
So just change local to public and we're good.
I think so.
Okay, that sounds good. Everybody okay with the rest of that?
yeah, and just a reminder that our title is Fund Local Culverts. So local is the big umbrella. And then we talk about
Yeah, good. Well, great.
Okay, and then the last one, opposed density mandates. I had some issues with this one because I don't want it to sound like Gig Harbor doesn't know that it needs to do its part with affordable housing and attainable housing. And that second sentence sounded very NIMBY-ish to me. So I think the essence I got from our last meeting is what we really want is local control in general over our zoning. And so I think we should just call it local control and get rid of that second sentence and just say local decisions are best made by elected officials who know their community well. And then say Gig Harbor opposes legislation preempting local control over land use, including density mandates. I don't really have a problem with that. But when it called out affordable housing, it makes us sound like, I mean, obviously the urban areas are going to do more because more people belong in transit oriented communities near work and all that stuff. But we have a part to play in all of that. Councilmember Marklear, Councilmember Rodenberg, do you have any thoughts on that? Am I off base?
No, I think you're all right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's a huge big deal. I guess the end of the sentence where it says, and do not account for the character and needs of communities like Gig Harbor. We do have need of affordable housing in Gig Harbor. So that's kind of saying like, we don't need affordable housing. So I guess I would support taking that second sentence out and just having the first and the last sentence in there. Or modifying that second sentence if we need to mention that the legislature has passed down zoning and affordable housing mandates that are tailored to urban communities.
I would just
However,
say-
Gig Harbor seeks to retain local control or something like that, like take out that part about the character of and needs of communities. Change that last part maybe.
Maybe just say the legislature has passed zoning mandates that are tailored to urban communities, period. Or even just say, in recent years, the legislature has passed zoning mandates. Leave the rest of it out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd be good with that.
So would I.
Thank you, Tony. You seem to know how to just cut to the to the chase. Keep it simple.
Doing it for 30 years.
All right, Josh, do we need to go over the support opposed list as well, do you think?
And we were going to change the title of this one to oppose zoning mandates. Was that it?
Or local control, or what do you think, Josh?
I think local control.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I just wanted to say that I looked through some of our old documents and the congestion relief study was completed in 2017. So we can incorporate that into the language.
If you think that's a good idea. I mean, I don't want them to think it's outdated either, so. But my point was that we've been asking for this for a long time. We've had the issue for a long time.
And the issue doesn't get any better. So
I would take out recently and just after the word study put in 2017.
Okay. Josh, moving on to supports opposed list.
Totally up to you. We're happy to make any changes that you so desire.
Okay, I was good on all of this. Councilmember Markley and Rodenberg, did you guys have any changes here?
no, I thought they were right on.
Yeah, I did too.
Okay. Then if there's nothing else, Josh, we'll move on to Dale and the update on all the money that's coming our way, right, Dale?
Yeah, so we're getting near the end of the year and things are starting to get final. The way Congress and the White House decided to deal with all these bills, not only the annual budget, but also some of these big infrastructure bills broken into two parts, human and hard. And the hard infrastructure is your sort of typical surface transportation and water and broadband, et cetera. And then the human is some of the healthcare and housing and some of those issues, which is a much larger price tag. At least what the president wanted is to try to deal with that first and then come back to the budget after. It was looking like we would have a deal today. The way the structure of the Senate works with power and the filibuster, the couple moderate Democratic senators have been able to pretty much negotiate whatever they wanted in these two larger pieces of legislation. And today that one of those senators, the senator from West Virginia, said that he still needs to see more on the human side before he agrees to a deal, and then he complained that the House isn't passing the hard infrastructure bill that got 69 votes in the Senate. So that's just a reality. We still could, behind closed doors, still could see a deal and see a vote on those two, or at least one this week, but it seems a challenge. I do think the Senate infrastructure bill, which has the surface transportation reauthorization, this is a lot of process, I know, and I'm sorry, you can ask any question you'd like, but will happen. And I think the quote unquote human infrastructure bill will likely be even more pared down from where we are today, which is about half of what the president initially asked for on that side. What does that mean for us? Could potentially on the surface side, it'll potentially mean a lot more federal money will be available to local governments, state governments. On the surface transportation bill, the House took requests for earmark funding, but the Senate did not. So the Senate in their bill added a $6 billion fund that doesn't have a lot of bill language associated with it, with the idea that once that bill's passed, the members can then request from, this case would likely be the Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Transportation. I talked with Tony about that process. We won't know that process until that bill is signed by the president. The legislative language is very general, so they would have to negotiate with USDOT. I suggested to Tony that once that's done, assuming we have a hard infrastructure bill this month, the earliest we would know about that process would likely be end of the year, very early in January. I know the members would be very eager to get the parameters on that. What would help us in that process, we did submit to the Murray office those infrastructure projects that we had of interest in that process, even though the Senate ended up not requesting those of the committees. So we've engaged with them and asked them about that process should that bill be signed by the president, and they said they'll get back to us when they know that. On the appropriations side, again, the House went through the appropriations process. The Senate, which is typical, passed just a few of their 12 bills in committee, none out of committee, and none on the floor. They'll likely revisit that once they deal with these two large pieces of policy, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and then the human one as well. And that right now, because the budget runs out in December 3rd, will likely be a December timeframe when they start finalizing those bills. So the things that we've requested out of appropriations, we won't know for sure until likely December. And although our job is to ask questions of the people that work these pieces of legislation. And we've been asking the senators' offices in particular, what they foresee will be the end result. And I'm not optimistic that they will go for the types of projects we requested. It seems like they're going to go for more nonprofit, a lot of tribal infrastructure, partnership projects, things like that. So the words we get are, we're not favoring your typical bread and butter highway infrastructure this go around, this first time coming back to the process and the appropriations process. So we don't know that for sure, but I'm getting that feeling. And I talked to Tony about how going into next year, we will know that for sure. And we'll also know how Congress will be dealing with this now that they've come back to earmark funding, and we can better sort of analyze how we approach that process and have more time to do it. And so, I think overall, I think we are in a very good place. People love our city and its historic position and sort of its gateway to the peninsula. And I think we'll have whether it's this year and next year or next year, a better ability to figure out how to navigate these new processes.
So the bottom line is, in the House, our requests are probably not going anywhere. And we
Well,
should focus more of our energy on the Senate.
Yeah, this year the Congress, it was very different than it was, when we did it 10 years ago. The House members got only, even if they were on the committee, they got 10 requests total out of there's 12 appropriations bills. They earmark 8 of them. And so they only got to request 10 earmarks total, just to request them. So they were lobbying the committee. And Congressman Kilmer only requested 1 municipal project. All of his projects were several tribal projects. He had a few nonprofits, but he only requested 1 from his entire district. And in talking with them, that's what they prioritized. And that's the Senate senators don't have those restrictions. But again, we've had to sort of talk with them about how they see this process unfold. And I think they may be similar to what the House did as far as what they prioritized in this fiscal year 2022 process.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that they will do the same. Again, we'll have more lead time. The president, it'll be more of a standard year. The president will come out with his budget in February. The committees in the budget resolution will probably happen soon after that. In March and April, the committees and subcommittees will have deadlines. So that's much more lag time to analyze this year's process, talk to the people involved in the process, for next year. And I guess it would be in a present tense at that time, and then try to, figure out how we can, whether we're successful this year or not, like how we can, tailor the needs that the city has, which are many, to what they're looking for.
Got it.
Okay, well, thank you, Dale, for all of your work. And I know I'm sure it's exhausting over there in DC.
It's just a lot of, it's a lot more process and a lot more particular. It's a lot more particular, I guess is a good word, than the state it's a lot more process and a lot more particular. And this was so new so far as the earmarks go, and they're simultaneously trying to pass these large policy bills, which has an immense fiscal impact, that there's just a lot of moving parts. And we're just trying to keep up with it and get our knowledge base of it, not only this year, but I do think regardless, next year will be, it'll be better to figure out how to navigate what both Congress and this administration is trying to do.
Great. Well, thank you. We're glad you're there.
Thank
Watch
you.
it out for us. Okay, I apologize, Director Knutson. I completely skipped over your segment of the agenda, which is CPA and UGA zoning. So I'm sorry. I was so looking forward to hearing about the federal stuff. So Director Knutson, would you like to start? I think you kind of know what we had in mind here for this, or what I was thinking about.
Thank you. Councilmember Denson, this topic, I think largely we covered with council at a work session last week. However, as this is the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee, it doesn't just have to do with state or federal elected officials. It could also be with our local Pierce County council members. And so I think it's important to reiterate that we have processes in place to review projects within the urban growth area. I know that there have been a number of concerns from various folks about growth or how development is occurring within the UGA, within Gig Harbor's UGA. And just to tie a bow on that, the mayor, city administrator, and myself, we met with the Pierce County executive, a member of the county council staff, as well as the planning and public works director for Pierce County, specifically regarding Pierce County's application of the SEPA regulations for the state, as well as development within our urban growth area. And on both fronts, again, that was positive outcomes from the meetings. First of all, the Pierce County Planning and Public Works Department, they said that they have been misapplying SEPA for about 20 years in all aspects of the urban growth areas.
Wow.
Countywide. So at least since 1992, they have been misapplying that. And that's something that my staff has been working for about 1.5 years to prove and justify to their department that they were misapplying that. So big kudos again to Kim Mahoney on the planning division team. She did great work, background work with that, and her connections with Department of Ecology really paid off for the city. On the other side, something that we will continue to work on, and I believe Councilmember Denson, you mentioned this in the budget meeting last week, is a potential for a joint planning agreement or an urban growth area management agreement within for the urban growth area lands. And so there's many ways that that can take shape, but we did receive a head nod from the Pierce County executive and agreement from the director of Planning and Public Works that they'll dedicate staff time to work with city staff to propose one of those agreements next year. So I believe on both fronts, SEPA and for joint planning for the UGA, we are on a good path. And I don't necessarily, my professional opinion is I don't know if we need additional inference right now. However, be happy to provide updates to this committee or the planning and building committee next year. But I do think that we're on a really good path. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, or if there are suggestions.
I'm just going to make one other comment. While all of that is good news, the potential negative is we can't come to any kind of agreement with the county when it comes to growth in our UGA. And they continue just to apply their own rules rather than any of ours. So part of the discussion here is there any change to state law that would box the counties in a little bit and make them at least use some of our development regulations, if not all of our development regulations in the UGA?
Yes, I agree, Tony. Mr. Weiss, can we do that? Or, sorry, Director Knudsen.
It's definitely a consideration, and one of the items, and just to from having been planning at a county level for 10 years prior to coming to the city, one of the things that the counties will say is, okay, if you want it so bad, take it. And so that was another item that we let the executive know. We have an urban growth area study going on right now that will put together some policy framework for council consideration of targeted annexations. And so I think that that's an important part to show that Gig Harbor, we're not just saying, hey, develop the UGA consistent with the city. We're also saying we're putting together this study and we're looking to potentially annex our urban growth area in a systematic way. Because without that component, I could see the county or counties saying, whoa, part of this is we'll do it our way. And it's kind of I don't know if it's a carrot or a stick, but we'll have it go our way. And if you want it your way, you take it. I think that's kind of part of the push to get cities to annex property.
And correct me if I'm wrong, property can be annexed 3 ways: through a vote of the people living in the annexation area, petition signed by a number of property owners that equals a certain percentage of the value of the land, and then through what's called an annexation agreement between us and the county, where the people or the property owners don't get any kind of a say other than speaking at a county council meeting or a city council meeting.
Yep, that's correct.
So what could happen is if we push the county real hard to enforce our zoning rules in the UGA, they could just simply say, fine, here's an agreement for you to annex this. We'll adopt it. You adopt it. It's in your city. You can put your zoning rules in place.
That's correct, Tony. So it's a very delicate dance with these agreements, and that's sometimes why they fail. I do think that we're at a good point. We're doing all the right things. we have a lot of items lined up. There is the 2024 periodic comp plan update coming up. Found out from one of the planners that's been at Pierce County for 25 years that the county and the city were looking at a joint planning agreement in the early 90s, and that failed for whatever reason. So we're going to look back historically at what that was and kind of why those fell apart, and try to avoid going down those into those
Right.
pitfalls.
So then talking to our two folks from Gordon Thomas who help us at the state level, what sort of reaction do you think we would get from our two representatives or senator, or for the House or Senate all by itself, if we were to come in and say, strengthen up the language that would force the counties to be enforcing our rules rather than their own rules when it comes to development?
I think the first thing is, as was noted earlier, it really would be something that you need to be prepared to fight the county probably, and certainly the rest of the counties in the state. I think the question would be whether or not, AWC would come in and other cities would come in and support. It's not clear. Yeah.
No one said anything, but one question, which is this same point. If we said that, they're going to be afraid that every city is going to want their own UGA under their own codes. And now they've got a dozen cities that are fighting for a say in all their UGA, and they're going to fight that. So I agree. If we don't have the other cities on board first, I don't even think it's worth, I think we're going alone.
And just a little bit build off of that, generally you want to exhaust all of your administrative relief prior to going forward with something. I think what I'm trying to say, maybe not in such an eloquent way, is that we have an administrative process in the joint planning agreement or the urban growth area management agreement that we have not exhausted yet. And so it's my opinion that we should try that first prior to doing asking for state relief. Again, we do want local control. And so to the maximum extent that we can, trying to keep this between us and the county and not involve, the whole state, I think would benefit the city.
The other idea would be that the legislature just kicked off another 2-year GMA review process. And I think that would be a really good forum to be bringing that up in, to be saying, this is an issue that needs to get resolved, that counties really should be applying city codes within the unincorporated areas of the UGA and pushing on that there. So maybe, we could get it included in that broader, more comprehensive review of the UGA. But yeah, I agree with Katrina. The legislature is going to ask you, well, have you done everything you possibly can?
So possibly what we do is we continue our work with the county, see if we get a UGA-MA in place. And if it falls apart next late summer, early fall, we get ourselves somebody from the city appointed to the AWC Legislative Committee, get on the land use subcommittee and say, this is something that is important to us. We would like it to end up being a priority for AWC, and see what kind of reaction we get.
I think that's a great idea.
I think I agree with both Josh and City Administrator Pisecki, but especially Director Knudsen. Let's exhaust the means that we have at our disposal now before we take any more drastic steps, that we may be able to do it at a lower level, at the county level.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry, just one more thing. I did actually talk to AWC staff in the last week about this, and that covers land use, Carl Schrader, and they're aware of this issue, sort of broadly speaking, with cities. I think they'd be willing to put energy and effort into it if it was highlighted by the city. So even short of, Tony, to your point, I think that just sort of chirping away at AWC's ear, I think would be also just effective informally.
I can chirp really good.
All right, that sounds good. And thank you so much, Director Knudsen, for your work. It sounds like you're making great progress with the county. And of course, we'd rather do it in a way that is friendly and we're all working together than mandating it, but so this is a good first step.
Would this committee like a report back quarterly, or should we do that to the planning and building committee, or both?
And do both.
On both, okay.
I don't want to make more work for you, but if there's something to report, it would be great to know.
Yeah, that'd be good. Thanks.
And kudos to Maloney, is that her name? That did the hard work.
Yeah, Kim Mahoney.
Yeah, so kudos to her. That's hard delving into all that old stuff. And
She is
And
sharp,
coming up.
by the way. She is. She is.
so
really sharp.
good job there.
Thank you. I'll pass that along.
Okay, I think we are at the end of our agenda. Is there anything else anybody wanted to discuss? Oh, yes, Josh.
Madam Chair, so if it's all right with the committee, we need to adopt the legislative agenda, and we'll work with Josh Stecker to get on your agenda to do that. And then we also are probably going to go ahead and start setting up meetings with your legislators for after adoption to brief them on our legislative agenda. And then we'll also be working with you on the open house. So just some next steps there from our perspective before legislative session.
So a motion to adopt the legislative agenda as modified or as amended is in order.
In this committee or at a council meeting?
It'll need to happen at a council meeting. We have it on the agenda for November 8th.
Does this committee need, does the committee need to recommend it?
They've essentially already done that with their changes.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Just
Okay,
make sure
adopted.
keep getting the process right.
So then would you be explaining this at the November 8th meeting?
I have no problem doing it if Josh or Annika can't be there.
I
Well,
can
one
be-
thing, before the end of the year, I think it's good for the lobbyists to be able to meet with all council. And maybe that's a brief report, but I just think, I mean, we've got the 3 council members here, but before the end of the year, and some people are running and some are not, it's better, Bob Hymes isn't staying on, and myself. I think it's good to have our lobbyist, or the 3 of you, if Dale's too busy, I understand. But maybe be at one of our council meetings, just briefly touching base with all council.
I think it probably makes the most sense when we're adopting this, so they're there to answer questions or if something else comes up out of the blue.
That sounds great. And then they don't have to come twice.
Okay,
All right, well then I will take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second,
All those in favor, say aye.
aye.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.